The December wind pressed against the wooden slats of my old house, making them sigh the way age makes a tired man breathe. But inside my kitchen, the warmth glowed steady and familiar. I sat at the table with a cloth in hand, polishing the boots I only wore on days that mattered. Beside them lay 3 simple gifts, arranged with the kind of care only a father understands. A bottle of small-batch whiskey I had aged myself for 5 winters. A jar of smoked beef jerky seasoned with a recipe older than my own gray hair. And a scarf I had woven by hand for my daughter-in-law, even though I suspected she preferred things far more elegant than anything my hands could create. 6 months earlier, my son Lucas had driven down to see me. He had stepped out of his truck with that easy grin of his, slung an arm around my shoulders, and said, "Dad, this year you are spending Christmas with us. No excuses." He had promised brisket slow-smoked for 16 hours, a tree tall enough to brush the ceiling, and laughter that would fill the walls. That promise carried me through the lonely afternoons of late autumn, through silent dinners and nights where only the old radio dared speak. So, on that cold evening, with the gifts ready and my boots shining, my heart felt lighter than it had in a long time. When my phone buzzed, I wiped my hands and reached for it, expecting a message about the bus schedule or a reminder to bring my famous jalapeno cornbread. Instead, the words on the screen froze the warmth inside me. "Old man, don't come here. I don't need you." The grammar was precise, the tone sharp and cold. Not Lucas. Never Lucas. He teased me sometimes, but always with affection. Pops, old-timer, champ. Never old man. I stared at the message long enough for the room to lose its shape. Something was wrong. Not the kind of wrong that can be talked away. Something deeper, darker. I called him immediately. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Same empty cheeriness of the automated greeting. My chest tightened with a pressure I had only felt once before, when a storm nearly trapped us on the ranch decades ago. A father's instinct is not poetry. It is a warning bell forged from years of knowing a child's voice, their habits, their truths. I dialed his wife, Mara. When she answered, her voice came thin, breathless, and trembling in a way she tried to hide. "Oh, hi, Dad. Is everything okay? Where is Lucas?" I asked. "I got a strange message from his number. He's sleeping," she cut in quickly. "Actually, no. Wait. We are at the airport." "Yes. The airport. Last-minute trip. Emergency. You should not come. Please don't." Her words sounded stitched together, the kind of story made by someone who is terrified and hoping you cannot hear it. And then the detail that cracked everything open. Behind her voice, beneath her frantic breathing, came heavy bass. Rap music, thundering loud and violent. Music Lucas would not tolerate in his home. Music, he once said, glorified the very things he spent his life rejecting. Then a man's voice barked in the background, rough and amused. "Hang up. Tell him to get lost." The call ended abruptly. I stood there for a moment, unable to move, gripping the phone so tightly that my knuckles went white. A softer man might have sat back down at the table, convinced himself it was a misunderstanding, and let the cold swallow the warm hopes of the night. But I am not a soft man. I have survived storms that ripped shingles from roofs, men who mistook kindness for weakness, and losses that carve scars no one sees. The years may have dulled my knees and stiffened my back, but one thing age sharpened was instinct. And that instinct screamed at me now. I set the phone down. My hands did not tremble. I rose slowly, reached for my worn jacket, hanging by the door, and slipped it on. Then I opened the drawer and pulled out the folding knife with the wooden handle. The blade had cut rope, carved branches, and only once, saved my life when trouble came without warning. Tonight, it might have to save my son. I cast one last look at the table, at the gifts waiting, at the boots gleaming, at the promise of a Christmas that should have been simple and warm. Then I stepped into the cold and locked the door behind me. I was not traveling to a holiday dinner. I was traveling into whatever darkness had swallowed my boy. The road out of my little town stretched ahead like a dark ribbon stitched into the earth. and the bus that carried me forward rumbled with the slow determination of an old beast that had seen too many winters. I took a seat near the back, where I could see every aisle, every shadow, and every stranger who might turn and look too long. Not because I expected danger here, but because my whole body was trained for it now, alive in a way that only fear for your child can awaken. The bus lights flickered overhead as we pulled away from the station. Outside, houses passed by with windows glowing yellow against the night. Families gathered around fireplaces and tables, doing what families should do on a night like this. But beyond those warm walls lay the long quiet of the road, and I was headed straight into it with nothing but a duffel bag, a knife, and a father's instinct pounding like a second heartbeat. Across the aisle, a woman with graying hair clutched a shopping bag to her chest as if her whole life were in it. A college kid 2 rows up drifted between sleep and the music in his headphones. A man in a faded cap muttered to himself while scrolling through his phone. Ordinary people living ordinary lives. I used to be one of them. Before the message, before the voice behind Mara's fear broke the night apart. I pressed my fingers lightly against the inside pocket of my jacket where the folding knife rested. It had been with me for decades, but tonight it felt heavier, not because of the steel, but because of what it symbolized. Action, protection, resolve. My reflection stared back at me from the window, a face lined with more years than I liked to admit, eyes that had seen both kindness and cruelty. Hands that once taught a boy how to tie knots, fix fences, saddle horses. Lucas had learned those lessons well. He grew into a man who kept his promises, who worked with pride, who faced problems head-on. The kind of man who would never send me a message like the one I received. That fact hung over everything like a shadow that would not move. The engine growled as we reached open highway. Miles of dark, empty land stretched on either side. Flat fields, distant silhouettes of trees, the occasional flicker of a farmhouse, far from the road. The moon hung pale and thin above us, and the desert silence wrapped around the bus like a second shell. With nothing to do but think, I let memory take the wheel. I saw Lucas at 7 years old, his small hands gripping the frayed lead rope of a lost heifer we had tracked down a ravine. He had slipped on loose gravel, scraped his knees, torn his jacket, but he never let go of the rope. He held tight, breathing hard, his eyes fierce with determination. "We are a good team, right, Dad?" he had said afterward, his chin lifted with pride. "Yes, son," I told him. "The best." That memory pressed into me with the weight of a stone. How could a boy with that heart, that spirit, be in trouble now? And how deep did the danger run that Mara could not speak freely? Her voice kept replaying in my mind, cracked like thin ice. The bruise I imagined on her wrist. The man's voice behind her telling her to hang up. That violent music thundering behind everything. I shifted in my seat, restless and burning with the need to do something. But on the road, in the dark, all I could do was move forward inch by inch, mile by mile. The driver's voice cut through the silence. "Heading far tonight?" he called back, his eyes catching mine in the rearview mirror. "Something like that?" I replied. "Family trouble?" I hesitated, then said, "Yes, my boy." He nodded slowly, as if he recognized something in my tone, something older than language. "Hope it works out, sir." I did not answer. Hope was too small a word for what I needed. I needed truth. I needed strength. I needed to reach my son before the night swallowed him whole. Lights appeared on the horizon, faint and scattered. Civilization creeping back in. Gas stations, late-night diners with neon signs flickering in tired colors, small clusters of houses that seemed to huddle together for warmth. The bus slowed as it approached a larger stop near the edge of town. The air brakes hissed, and the engine vibrated beneath me like a restless animal. Passengers gathered their things, preparing to step off into the cold. I waited. When we finally reached the main terminal, the bus shuddered to a full stop. The doors swung open with a tired groan. I stepped down onto the cracked pavement, the December cold hitting me like a slap, sharp and bracing. The The smell of diesel hung in the air. Beyond the dim street lamps lay a stretch of roads and shadows that would lead me to my son or to whatever waited in his place. I took a deep breath and pulled my jacket tighter around me. This was not a visit. This was a search, and I intended to find the truth, no matter what it cost. The taxi rolled through the sleeping streets like a tired sentinel, its headlights sweeping across porches, draped in Christmas lights and lawns, guarded by inflatable snowmen that danced weakly in the wind. Everywhere I looked, the world wore its holiday face. Windows glowed with warm gold. Families moved inside their homes in soft silhouettes. Joy lived everywhere, but not in me. Not tonight. The driver, a quiet man with tired eyes, kept his gaze on the road. He seemed to sense the weight I carried, the kind of heaviness that keeps a man from speaking. When we finally turned down the long road leading toward my son's neighborhood, he glanced at me briefly as if to offer comfort, then thought better of it. Some storms sit too deep for strangers to touch. We slowed near Lucas's street. Even before the car stopped, something in me tightened. The houses on both sides sparkled, with lights, reds, blues, whites shimmering along roofs and railings. Plastic reindeer stood in perfect rows. Someone's speakers softly played an old holiday tune that floated faintly through the cold. But in the middle of all that cheer, one house sat dark. Lucas's house, silent, unlit. Wrong. Here? The driver asked. Yes, I said quietly. He pulled to a stop. I handed him cash and stepped out before the meter finished beeping. The cold hit me first, sharp enough to sting the inside of my nose. Then, the silence, the heavy kind, like a held breath. The taxi drove off, its taillights shrinking down the street until they vanished. I stood alone in front of my son's property. 3 trucks sat crookedly across the front lawn, their tires sunk into deep grooves in the grass. Big black pickup trucks. Mud splashed across their sides as if they'd come barreling through back roads at top speed. The engines were cold now, but I could feel the violence they carried with them. Lucas would never allow anyone to park on his lawn. He treated that grass like a ritual, cut every week, watered every morning, edges trimmed so clean you could run a ruler along them. But now, it was torn, crushed, ruined. I walked closer, hiding in the shadow of a palm tree. That was when I heard it. Loud, pulsing music thudding through the walls. Not just rap, something harsher, bass-heavy, a rhythmic violence that clashed against every memory I had of Lucas's quiet evenings and soft jazz. Through the front window, a small gap in the curtains revealed a slice of the living room. What I saw made my stomach turn hot and tight. Inside, a group of strangers lounged like they owned the place. A heavy-set man, with a flushed face, sat on Lucas's leather couch, the couch my son had saved up for, piece by piece, because he wanted something sturdy that would last. The stranger leaned back, drinking straight from a top-shelf bottle, one Lucas kept for special occasions, and spilling some on his shirt without caring. A woman beside him, her makeup too thick, her laugh too sharp, flicked ash from her cigarette onto the white wool rug I had helped Lucas pick out last spring. Then, another man walked into view, younger, broad shoulders, a shaved head glinting under the ceiling light, boots on the coffee table on the wood. Lucas polished every month. A thick chain hung around his neck, and a tattoo of a serpent curled up his forearm. He held one of Lucas's kitchen knives, using it casually to clean beneath his fingernails. My breath hitched. This man did not belong here. None of them did. They were not guests. They were intruders. And if they were here, where was my son? The question beat at my ribs like a trapped bird. I stepped back into the yard, cold sliding down my spine. I needed answers. I needed to see Mara. I walked up the porch steps. My knees felt heavier than usual, but my resolve did not waver. For a second, I hesitated just long enough for the quiet to swallow me whole. But then I pressed the doorbell. The music inside abruptly cut off. Voices scrambled. Footsteps thudded. A muffled command, rough, irritated. Then the door cracked open. Mara stood there, or rather, the shell of her. Her hair, once soft and neatly pinned, now hung in loose, uneven pieces. Her eyes, always so full of warmth, stared back at me wide and hollow. A thin silk robe clung to her frame, and a cardigan slipped off her shoulders as if she'd thrown it on in haste. When she saw me, really saw me, her face drained of color. "Dad, why? Why are you here?" she stammered. I held up the message on my phone. "I came because of this. Where is Lucas?" She swallowed hard. "He's sleeping. We're leaving early tomorrow." Her lies tripped over each other, frantic and falling apart. Her gaze darted behind her, as if checking who might be listening. A figure filled the doorway behind her. The shaved head, the serpent tattoo, the chain necklace. He placed a hand on the door frame and leaned in with a smirk. "Well, look at this," he said, voice dripping venom. The old man showed up. His breath smelled like cheap beer and the kind of arrogance only cruelty can teach. He stepped between Mara and me, blocking her, blocking the house. "This is not your place anymore," he said. "Turn around. Leave." I didn't move. "I'm here for my son." He laughed, as if I had told a joke. "Your son's busy. You don't get to see him tonight. Or any night. Go home. Before I make you." I ignored him. Instead, I looked straight into Mara's eyes. That was when I saw it. A bruise on her wrist, dark, finger-shaped. A mark of fear. My jaw tightened. "Mara," I said softly. "Look at me. Where is Lucas?" Her lips parted, but only a tremble came out, not words. She looked like a woman caught between terror and hope was losing. Then the man shoved her aside and slammed the door in my face. The sound was explosive, final, deliberate. The deadbolt clicked. Music blasted again. Louder, crueler. I stood still on the porch, staring at the painted wood inches from my nose. In its reflection, I saw a worn old man holding a duffel bag of handmade gifts, a father who had once believed love alone could keep his family safe. To the men inside, I must have looked like nothing, but they had no idea who I was, or what I would do for my son. I stepped back from the door, slow and steady, letting the illusion of my retreat sink into the walls. Let them laugh. Let them relax. Let them believe they had scared me off. I walked down the driveway, boots crunching on broken bits of glass and torn grass. At the corner of the property, I stopped, crouched, and hid behind the hedge of a neighbor who had decorated their yard with plastic angels. 5 minutes passed. No one followed. No one watched. The music kept pounding. Good. I rose, slipped into the alley behind the houses, and made my way toward the back of the property. This was no longer a visit, no longer a question of discomfort or embarrassment. This was a rescue, and I was going to find my son, one way or another. The alley behind Lucas's home was a narrow strip of cracked pavement bordered by leaning fences and overgrown hedges that whispered in the cold wind. Out here, the cheerful lights of the neighborhood disappeared, replaced by the raw quiet of a place no one checked after dark. I moved slowly, boots crunching against loose gravel, every sense sharpened by the pounding of my own pulse. When I reached the back corner of the property, I stopped beneath the shadow of a crooked eucalyptus tree. Its long branches swayed overhead like dark fingers. I ran my hand along the wooden fence until I felt a weak spot, an aging plank, soft from years of sun and rain. With careful pressure, I pried it loose, just enough to slip through. The yard on the other side felt like stepping into another world, a world ruined, a place where something terrible had already happened. Lucas's roses, red varieties he planted with pride and tended every weekend, were flattened, their petals scattered across the dirt like torn scraps of fabric. The irrigation hose lay ripped open, water pooling into the soil and creating dark mud around my boots. Deep tire ruts carved crooked paths across the lawn, weaving back and forth as if someone had driven wildly through the yard without care or consequence. And then the smell hit me. Gasoline, motor oil, something chemical and sharp. And beneath it all, something old and sour. A smell I knew too well from the ranch. Fear, sweat, rot. I swallowed hard. This was no drunken party. This was violation, occupation. The house lights spilled faintly through the blinds, shadows moving inside. Silhouettes of strangers laughing, drinking, living comfortably while my son was nowhere to be found. But the backyard had another story to tell. I scanned the space, searching for something, anything, that might explain where Lucas had gone. The shed stood near the back corner of the yard, a small, weathered structure he had built 2 summers ago. I remembered the day he finished it. He had sent me a picture, proudly captioned, "First small victory of the year." But now, the shed looked wrong. Someone had reinforced the door. Metal brackets bolted across the wood. A massive commercial padlock hung at the center, polished, new, nothing like the cheap lock Lucas once used for garden tools. The gutters above sagged under weight, and a faint line of muddy footprints trailed from the back porch toward the shed door. I approached it quietly. Every muscle in my body coiled. Closer now, the stench grew stronger. Damp wood. Sweat. Something metallic. There was no sound at first, just the wind rustling the branches overhead. Then I leaned closer, pressing my ear to the cold wooden boards. At first, nothing. Then, a faint scrape. Something dragging. Metal against concrete. And then, barely audible. A breath. Another, shallow, strained. Then a whisper so thin it almost vanished into the night. "Water, please." My heart dropped into my stomach. No, not here. Not like this. I leaned in, my voice low and careful. "Lucas? Son? Is that you?" Silence stretched out, long enough that doubt began to creep in. Then, knock, 2 weak taps, like someone using the last bit of strength left in them. Then, a sound I had not heard since the day his mother died, a broken sob, raw and desperate. "Dad?" The single word cracked through me like lightning. My knees nearly buckled. I pressed my forehead to the cold boards. "I'm here, son. I'm right here. Hold on." Another quiet sob came from inside. They're going to kill me." A coldness, far deeper than winter, seeped into my bones. I stood up straight, jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Not while I'm breathing. I stepped back to study the lock. It was built for industrial use, thick steel, impossible to break with bare hands. The brackets holding it to the shed were new, heavy. The wood around them, however, had not been strengthened. And wood can be broken. I scanned the yard, searching for something I could use. Near the fence, entangled in a cluster of dead branches, lay a length of iron rebar, rusty but solid. Likely leftover from some unfinished landscaping. I picked it up, tested its weight. Strong enough. I returned to the shed, wedged the rebar between the metal bracket and the rotting wood. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from fury and urgency. I braced myself, gritted my teeth, and pushed. The wood groaned, splintered, held. I pushed harder, pouring into that bar every ounce of strength I had honed from decades of lifting fence posts and heaving hay bales. "Come on," I growled through my teeth. "Open, for my boy." Crack. A loud snap tore through the night. I froze. Listened. The music from the house continued, unbothered. No footsteps on the porch. No shouting. Good. I pushed again. Crack. The wood gave way, a chunk of it tearing loose, along with the metal bracket. The padlock clattered to the dirt. The door creaked open an inch. Then 2. I slipped inside. The darkness swallowed me whole. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight, but quickly angled it downward, careful not to shine it toward the house. The light swept over the floor. Stains, shredded bags of fertilizer, an overturned toolbox. And then, him. Lucas lay on his side, curled into himself, wearing nothing but torn shorts. His skin was bruised in shades of purple and black. His hair plastered to his forehead with sweat, his hands bound behind a wooden post with thick rope. But the worst was his leg. A heavy iron chain encircled his ankle. The other end was bolted into the concrete floor. His leg, oh God, his leg was swollen grotesquely, bent at an angle that should have been impossible. The skin stretched tight and discolored, as if it had been broken days ago and left untreated. "Lucas." My voice cracked as I knelt beside him. His eyes fluttered open, weak, swollen, bloodshot. "Dad," he breathed. "No, you shouldn't be here." I cupped his face with one shaking hand. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. "What did they do to you?" I whispered. He swallowed with difficulty. They said, "If I don't sign, they'll kill you too." My chest tightened painfully. "They're not killing anyone. I'm getting you out." His lips trembled. "Dad, Vance checks on me. Every hour. If he comes back and sees you," I shook my head. "I'm not leaving." My voice left no room for argument. I pulled my jacket off and draped it over his shaking shoulders. His body flinched, pain bursting through him as his injured leg shifted even slightly. "I'm here now," I murmured. "You held on until I came. That's what matters." The relief that flickered in his eyes nearly brought me to my knees. But then, a sound outside. Footsteps. Heavy. Unsteady. Getting closer. Lucas's breath hitched. "Dad." "Hide." I looked at the broken lock dangling from the ruined door. Not enough time. Not enough places to hide. And if I hid, Vance would inject him. No. I stood up straight, gripping the rebar at my side. Footsteps stopped. A hand rattled the shed door. Lucas whispered, voice breaking, "Dad, he has a gun." The latch began to lift. I stepped between my son and the door. My heart beat once, twice. The door swung open, and there stood the man who had broken my boy. He didn't know it yet, but his night was about to end. At the hands of a father, Vance stepped into the shed with the swagger of a man who believed nothing in the world could touch him. The dim moonlight framed him like a villain out of a story people whisper to scare children. A bottle hung loosely from his left hand, and in his right, a gun. A small black pistol, finger resting against the trigger like it belonged there. He did not bother turning on the light. He did not need it. He thought Lucas was helpless. He thought the world inside this shed belonged to him. "Well now," he slurred, kicking the door shut behind him. "Time for your medicine, buddy." He lifted the bottle in a mocking toast. "Merry Christmas, huh?" He took a step closer. That was all I needed. While his eyes adjusted to the darkness, I moved quiet, controlled, deliberate. The rebar was already in my grip, warm from the heat of my hand. I swung it fast and hard, aiming for the gun hand just like instinct taught me decades ago when a wild dog charged the ranch. Crack. The blow connected clean. Vance screamed, a raw animal sound, and the gun flew from his grip, skittering across the concrete floor with a metallic clatter that echoed like salvation. "What the?" His shock turned into fury instantly. He swung the bottle at my head. I ducked. It shattered against the wooden post behind me, spraying glass like glittering shrapnel. He staggered backward, off balance. "Behind me," Lucas gasped. "Dad, run." But I wasn't running. Not tonight. Not from the man who had chained my son like livestock. I lunged again, thrusting the rebar toward his knee, the one target guaranteed to drop a man twice my size. He twisted, at the last second. The blow glanced off his thigh instead. He grunted and stumbled, but did not fall. He was drunk, but not slow, not weak. Before I could reposition, he charged. His shoulder slammed into my chest with the force of a bull. Air rushed from my lungs. My back hit the fertilizer bags stacked against the wall, knocking the breath out of me. The rebar flew from my hand, landing somewhere behind him with a hollow clang. He towered over me now, his face twisted into something monstrous. "You old freak," he snarled, spittle flying. "You think you can take me? You think you can walk in here and ruin everything?" His hands clamped around my throat, thick, calloused fingers, squeezing with brutal strength. My vision dimmed at the edges. Stars danced in front of me. The world began to blur, shrinking to the feeling of his hands crushing my windpipe. I clawed at his wrists, searching for leverage, for breath, for anything. None came. Somewhere through the haze, I heard Lucas screaming. "Stop! Let him go!" Vance only squeezed harder. My lungs burned. My body grew heavy. A cold numbness crept up my limbs. Not like this, I thought. Not in front of my boy. Not dying at the hands of a coward. I forced my hand down, searching blindly inside my jacket. Fingers brushed wood. The folding knife, my old, dependable blade. I flicked it open in one motion. Decades of instinct guided my arm. I jabbed upward. The knife plunged into the meat of his thigh, not fatal, but deep enough to drop a man who thought he was untouchable. Vance screamed again, this time raw with pain, pure and unguarded. His hands released my throat instantly as he stumbled backward, collapsing onto his side and clutching at the wound. Air flooded back into my lungs in painful gasps. I choked, coughed, forced breath into my body one ragged gulp at a time. My throat pulsed with agony, but I was alive, still fighting. Lucas panted from his corner, voice hoarse. "Dad, the gun, get the gun." I crawled across the floor, my knees screaming in protest, and found the pistol half hidden under the shadow of the mower. My hand closed around the cold metal. I turned, aimed it at Vance. He froze, eyes wide, breath coming in shallow bursts. Don't shoot," he whined, voice cracking. "It was just a joke. Just a joke. Please, man." I stepped closer, leveling the barrel at his chest. "A joke?" I repeated quietly. "This is what you call a joke?" His lip trembled. "It wasn't my idea." "Wade," he said. "We had to. He said your son was making trouble, and that gives you the right to torture him?" My voice shook with rage I could barely contain. "To break his leg? Chain him like an animal? Drug him? No, please," he babbled, hands raised in trembling surrender. "Please don't shoot." I didn't. Death was too easy, too clean. Instead, I picked up the rebar lying near his ankle and swung it in a controlled, precise arc. Thud. He collapsed unconscious, not dead, sprawled out like the pathetic creature he was. My breath shuddered out of me. The shed felt too small now, too full of fear and smoke and the sour stench of pain. But I couldn't rest. Not yet. Not with danger still circling us like wolves. "Dad," Lucas whispered, "we have to go. They'll hear him. They'll come." I knelt beside him, forcing my hands to steady. I touched his face gently. "I know, son. I'm here. I'm getting you out." But it wasn't easy. The rope binding his wrists was thick and cruelly knotted. My knife sawed through it, while his shaky breath filled the room with soft whimpers he tried to hold back. When the last knot gave way, Lucas sagged forward into my arms, his weight limp and exhausted. Then, I moved to the chain. The padlock had no key. The bolt, anchoring it to the concrete, was industrial, drilled deep. The chain itself, heavy steel, thick, meant to hold large equipment or angry men. But near the looped joint, rust had formed. A weakness. "Hang on, Lucas," I murmured. "This will hurt." He nodded, jaw clenched so tight his teeth creaked. With a grunt, I wedged the rebar between the chain links, leveraged with every ounce of desperate strength left in me. The rust groaned, bent, held. I pushed harder. Krrk. The link snapped free. Lucas gasped a sharp, guttural sound, but the chain fell away from the floor at last, rattling against the cement in a harsh metallic cascade. We had seconds, maybe less. I hauled Lucas up, his arm over my shoulder, his broken leg barely able to touch the ground. And then, from the yard, a woman screamed. Not a scream of fear, a scream of rage. Vance, Lucas's wife. Mara. Footsteps thundered across the deck. A door burst open. Voices shouted. More than one. Too many. "Dad," Lucas whispered, gripping my jacket. "They're coming." I lifted him higher, tightening my grip, my pulse slamming in my chest. "Then we move now," I said. Because the night was far from over, and the real danger had only just begun. The scream cut through the night like a blade, sharp enough to slice the cold air in half. "Vance, answer me." Mara's voice pierced with hysteria, warped with something between terror and loyalty. Her footsteps slapped hard against the wooden porch, fast and uneven. A door banged open. The music inside the house stopped abruptly, leaving behind a silence so sudden and thick it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. "They know," Lucas whispered. His fingers tightened around my jacket, trembling. "Dad, they know he's gone quiet." I pulled him closer, bracing his weight against my shoulder. His broken leg barely brushed the floor, but even that contact made him gasp in pain. "Hold on," I murmured. "We're not done yet." From inside the house, another voice erupted deeper, angrier. "Check the yard. Now." Not one voice. Several. Boots pounded against the wooden deck. A man shouted orders. Another cursed. A woman whimpered. A screen door slammed shut. They were coming. All of them. And fast. I extinguished my phone's flashlight and plunged us back into darkness. The shed walls framed the faint moonlight like a doorway to escape. But the clearing beyond was suddenly too exposed, too open. We needed cover. We needed seconds. And we didn't have either. I dragged Lucas out of the shed, keeping low. His breath hitched with each dragging step, the broken chain still attached to his ankle scraping against the dirt. Clink, clink, betraying our path, like breadcrumbs left for wolves. "Dad, the chain," Lucas panted. "I know," I whispered. "I know, son. We'll manage." But the sound would get us killed if I didn't quiet it. I crouched and wrapped the loose end with my jacket sleeve, gripping it tight so it wouldn't drag. The metal links chilled my palm but stayed quiet enough. Just in time, because a flashlight beam sliced across the backyard. There, by the shed, a man's voice weighed. I pulled Lucas behind the shadow of a twisted lemon tree, both of us breathing in sync with fear. Another beam joined the first. Then another. The night erupted into harsh white circles, sweeping the ground. Mara's voice trembled. "Something's wrong. He's not answering. He's not." "Shut up, Mara," Wade barked. "Just find the old man and the boy." Then, boom. The first shotgun blast ripped through the backyard. Bark exploded from the lemon tree above us. The shockwave punched my ears and sent a rain of splinters cascading onto our heads. "Dad," Lucas gasped, clutching me. "I'm fine," I rasped, though my heart slammed so hard it felt like it might leap from my chest. Another blast followed. Another explosion of wood. They were firing blind, furious, unhinged. The tree could not shield us for long. I scanned the yard. The only path was toward the side gate, half hidden by shrubs, barely visible under the moonlight. If we reached it, we could get around the house to the front yard. But between us and that gate, 20 yards of open ground. "Lucas," I whispered, "listen to me. When I move, you move. Lean on me. Keep your weight off your right leg." He nodded, jaw clenched so tightly the muscles trembled. Another flashlight beam neared the shed. They were seconds from discovering Vance on the floor. I exhaled once, a steadying breath. "Now," I whispered. We ran, or rather, I ran, dragging Lucas with every ounce of strength left in my body. His breath came in sharp, pained bursts. The metal chain clutched in my hand, bruised my palm with each step. Halfway across the yard, a flashlight found us. There, by the tree. Shoot. Boom. The shotgun roared. The ground erupted not a foot behind us, showering us with dirt and splinters. My ears rang. Lucas slipped. I caught him under the ribs, nearly collapsing under his weight. "Go," I urged, voice raw. "We're almost there." We reached the side of the house, pressing against the stucco wall as another blast tore through the shrubs where we had been seconds earlier. The gate was 3 steps away. 1 step, 2. I shoved it open with my shoulder. The hinges screeched loud enough to betray us. We stumbled into the front yard. And, for a brief moment, the night seemed to open around us. The trucks sat in the driveway like steel beasts, waiting for command. The street beyond was empty, silent, a dark path to freedom. "Dad," Lucas groaned softly. "Please, hurry." I half carried him to the nearest truck, the middle one, bulky, heavy-duty, keys hopefully still in the ignition. As we neared it, I fumbled through Vance's stolen keyring. My hands shook violently now, not from fear, but from adrenaline crashing into exhaustion. Behind us, footsteps pounded down the driveway gravel. More shouts. "They're in the front. Get the lights. Shoot if you see them." I pressed the unlock button on the key fob. Beep, beep. The truck blinked. Lights flashed. We yanked open the passenger door. I lifted Lucas into the seat as gently as possible, but he still cried out a sharp, choked sound that nearly broke me. "I'm sorry, son," I whispered. "Hold on." I slammed the door, sprinted around the front, and threw myself into the driver's seat. Wade rounded the corner of the house, shotgun aimed. Our eyes met through the windshield. "You old bastard," he screamed. "You're dead." He raised the gun. I turned the key. The engine roared to life like a waking monster. Wade pulled the trigger. Boom. The windshield cracked 2 spiderweb fractures right where my face had been half a second before. I floored the pedal. The truck lunged forward with the force of an enraged bull. Gravel flew in every direction. Wade jumped aside to avoid being crushed, rolling across the lawn. His shotgun clattered away. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The tires tore off the driveway, smashed through the iron gate at the property entrance, sending metal flying into the street with a deafening crash. My head slammed forward. The truck fishtailed. I gripped the wheel with both hands, forcing it straight. Beside me, Lucas was pale, sweating, barely conscious. "Dad," he whispered, voice fading. "I've got you," I said, eyes locked on the dark road ahead. "I've got you, son." Behind us, tiny figures spilled into the street. Wade, Mara, another man. They shouted, shrinking in the rearview mirror as we sped down the empty block. But it wasn't over. Not even close. Because enemies like the ones behind us wouldn't stop. They wouldn't rest. They wouldn't forgive. And as Lucas drifted into a dangerous, half-conscious daze beside me, one truth hit me harder than any shotgun blast. We still had to survive the night. The truck barreled through the sleeping streets, engine growling beneath us like a wounded animal desperate to survive. Streetlights flashed overhead in short bursts, carving Lucas's pale face into fragments of light and shadow. His head slumped against the seat, his breath thin and uneven. Every jolt of the truck made him wince, even unconscious, even drifting away from the pain. "Stay with me, son," I murmured, eyes flicking between the road and his trembling hands. "Don't you dare fall asleep." "Not yet." He didn't answer. The cold from the broken windshield seeped in, mixing with the faint smell of gasoline and blood. Behind us, no headlights followed, not yet. But that silence felt dangerous. Too quiet. Too temporary. Men like Wade did not accept loss. Men like that chased. And they chased hard. I gripped the wheel tighter, pushing the truck faster down the empty highway. My throat burned from Vance's grip, every swallow scraping like gravel. The pain kept me awake, kept me angry, kept me sharp. Lucas stirred weakly. "Dad, where are we?" "Somewhere safe soon," I answered. "Just stay awake. Talk to me if you can." His eyelids fluttered. It hurts." I reached over, squeezed his hand. "I know. I'm getting help. You hold on." He swallowed. "Dad, you came. I always will." The wind howled through the cracked windshield, carrying away the next words I wanted to say, words that caught in my chest like thorns. 10 minutes stretched into 20. The town's main medical center was too obvious, too exposed, too easy for Wade to reach. I needed somewhere smaller, somewhere with staff but not crowds, a place that wouldn't ask too many questions in the first 30 seconds. Then, like an answer carved out of darkness, a glowing blue sign appeared ahead. "Urgent care. Open 24 hours. Small building. Empty parking lot. A single nurse's car outside. Perfect." I whipped the truck into the lot, tires screeching across the pavement. The sudden stop jostled Lucas, wringing a soft cry from his lips. "Easy," I whispered. "I've got you." I jumped out, ran to the passenger side, and gently lifted him from the seat. His weight sagged into me, limp, cold, feverish. He swallowed a groan but said nothing. His eyes rolled back from pain as I carried him toward the sliding glass doors. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered over an empty waiting area. A young nurse sat behind the desk, half asleep over a stack of intake forms. When she saw Lucas chained and broken in my arms, her pen fell from her hand. Her eyes widened. Her breath caught. "Oh my God, sir. What happened?" "He needs help," I rasped. "Now." "His leg. The chain. He's going into shock." She ran from behind the desk, shouting for the doctor. Dr. Randall emerged from the hallway, a man in his 50s, with tired eyes and a stethoscope hanging crooked around his neck. His face shifted instantly from exhaustion to alarm. "Bring him back," he ordered. "Room 3. Now." They guided me quickly into a small treatment room. I laid Lucas onto the narrow bed as gently as I could. He cried out, despite his best attempt to stay silent. Dr. Randall examined him rapidly. Eyes, pulse, breathing, the swollen leg. "This isn't just a break," the doctor muttered, voice grave. "The tissue is swollen nearly to bursting. He could lose circulation. He's dehydrated. Feverish. And this." He touched the chain gingerly. "This is criminal." "What happened to him?" I hesitated. For the first time since arriving, I realized how this scene must look. A broken man. Chained. Injured. Delivered by someone with a torn jacket and a knife, still in my pocket. The truth sounded like madness when stripped of context. "I rescued him," I said. "His wife's family did this. They were forcing him." "We need to call the police," the doctor interrupted sharply. "This is beyond urgent care." "No," I said firmly. "Not local police. You don't understand." But he'd already turned to the nurse. "Report this. Now." My pulse hammered. "No. Listen to me, his wife's family owns the local sheriff. If you call them, they'll come here first. And they'll finish what they started." The doctor paused. His brows knit into skepticism. "You expect me to believe?" A sound cut through his words. "Sirens. 2, maybe 3. Coming fast." My blood iced. Too fast. Far too fast for a standard emergency call. The nurse whispered, terrified, "Doctor, I didn't even dial yet." Dr. Randall's face turned pale. "Then who?" The answer hit me before the words formed. They already knew we escaped. I moved toward the door, peering through the blinds. Red and blue lights flashed violently across the windows as 2 patrol cars swerved into the lot. Officers jumped out, hands on their weapons, scanning the entrance like wolves chasing a scent. My heart sank. Sheriff Carson, of course. He stepped out, last, big, smug, and already speaking into his radio. "Suspect is inside. Secure the exits." The doctor backed away, horrified. "Suspect? Sir, what is going on?" "They'll kill him," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "They're coming for Lucas. You have to move him." But Dr. Randall was frozen. The nurse looked ready to faint. The door to the clinic rattled. Deputies pushed through. No time. No escape through the hall. We were trapped. But I'd lived long enough to know. A trap only holds those who stop fighting. I grabbed the rolling supply cabinet and shoved it against the exam room door just as the first deputy tried to push in. The cabinet thudded against the frame, holding barely. "Open up," the deputy shouted. "Now," Lucas moaned softly behind me. "Dad, please." I turned to him. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. "Stay awake," I whispered fiercely. "I need you alive. I need you with me." Then I turned back to the trembling nurse. "You," I said. "I need your phone." She hesitated only a moment before handing it over, her hands shaking, eyes wide with terror. Sirens outside grew louder. Boots stomped through the clinic. Deputies shouted orders. The walls felt like they were closing in. I dialed the only number I trusted, one I had stored in memory like a sacred prayer. Agent Reed. A man I once taught. A man who owed me nothing but believed in truth. The phone rang once, twice. Then, "Hello." His voice, calm, steady, alive. I nearly collapsed with relief. "Reed," I whispered. "It's me. It's Nash. I found Lucas. They chained him. They broke him. They're trying to kill us. The sheriff is working with them. We're trapped at a small, urgent care outside town. Reed, please." He didn't hesitate. "Barricade the door. Keep your son alive. I'm coming." "How long?" I gasped, bracing the cabinet as deputies slammed into it again. 20 minutes, he said. Maybe less. 20 minutes felt like a lifetime. But his voice carried conviction, and conviction is sometimes enough to keep a man from breaking. Before I could answer, A deafening crash shook the room. The doorframe cracked. A tear gas canister rolled under the cabinet and hissed violently. White smoke erupted, filling the air with burning chemicals. My eyes stung. My throat closed. Lucas coughed violently. The deputies shouted from the other side. Final warning. Tears streamed down my face as I grabbed the nurse's phone again, because there was one thing that could save us faster than the FBI. The truth. Start recording, I told her. Go live. Right now. But, now, I barked through the choking haze. She fumbled with the screen, tears pooling in her eyes. The moment the camera went live, I faced it with smoke swirling around me. Lucas gasping behind me, deputies smashing into the door. My name is Nash, I said, voice shredding in my throat. This is what they did to my son. I stepped aside, revealing Lucas broken, bruised, chained. The world needed to see, to hear, to know, because if we died tonight, at least the truth would live. The live feed blinked to life on the nurse's phone, its small red icon glowing like a beacon in the fog of tear gas. My lungs burned, my eyes screamed, but I leaned toward that camera with every ounce of strength I had left. My name is Nash, I rasped, voice scraping like broken glass. And this is what they've done to my son. I stepped aside just enough for the camera to capture Lucas on the hospital bed. His body trembled uncontrollably. His legs swollen, bruised, twisted, looked like something torn from a nightmare. The chain still clamped around his ankle gleamed under the harsh fluorescent light, its links rattling as he fought for breath. Behind us, the exam room door buckled again. Boom, boom, boom. Deputy boots, shoulder hits. The cabinet shuddered and slid an inch with each blow. The nurse whimpered but held the phone steady. Her hands shook so badly the camera trembled, giving the live feed an urgency that felt like a heartbeat. I pointed straight at that lens, breathing smoke. His wife's family did this. They broke into his business. They chained him, tortured him, tried to force him into drug trafficking. And now, I coughed violently, chest seizing. Comments began pouring across the screen, fast, furious, panicked. What is happening? Call the FBI. Where are you? OMG. Someone help them now. Why is he chained? This is insane. The numbers skyrocketed instantly. 5 viewers. 20. 100. 1,000. People were watching. People were sharing. Deputies outside shouted again. Open the door. Last warning. I raised my voice, fighting the burn in my throat. If they take us tonight, if that door breaks down, my son will disappear. They will kill him. They will bury the truth. Do not let this get erased. Share it. Share it now. The nurse gasped. 15,000 people. Oh God. Then the final blow hit. The cabinet screeched across the floor as the door smashed inward, the frame splitting like dry bone. Tear gas filled the room in a greedy white cloud. Down! Everyone down! A deputy barked, raising his baton. The nurse screamed and dropped the phone, but it landed upright, still streaming, still showing everything. I stepped in front of Lucas, shielding him with my body. A baton struck my shoulder, hard. I hit the floor, gasping as the deputy loomed over me. Stay down, old man, he snarled. Another deputy lunged for the bed. No, I growled, pushing myself between them. A sharp crack tore through my body. The taser. Electricity ripped through my limbs. My muscles convulsed violently. The world jolted sideways. I collapsed. Unable to breathe. Unable to move. The live feed caught everything. The deputies dragging me across the floor. My face twisted with pain. Lucas reaching toward me, chain rattling as he screamed hoarsely, "Dad!" Tear gas rolling across the tiles like a smoke storm. Replies on the stream exploded into chaos. Stop them. This is police brutality. Someone call CNN. Tagging FBI now. This is insane. Share, share, share. The sheriff strode into the room with a smirk carved across his face like a scar. Sheriff Carson, thick mustache, small, mean eyes. A man who believed power could hide anything. Should have stayed home, old man, he muttered, lifting his baton. He raised it above my head. A killing blow. He wanted to end it. End me. Erase the problem, Lucas shouted, voice breaking. Dad, no, don't. But then, boom. The entire front of the clinic shook. Not from deputies, not from guns, from an explosive breach. The lights flickered, ceiling tiles trembled, dust shook free. Then, a shout erupted through the smoke and chaos. Federal agents, drop your weapons now. I forced my head up. 8 figures in full tactical gear surged down the hallway, black vests marked with bright letters that glowed even through the haze. FBI. Agent Reed at the front, helmet off, eyes burning with purpose. Carson froze. Deputies froze. The baton hovered inches above my face. Reed raised his voice, a voice I remembered from years ago, steadier now, stronger. That man is under federal protection. Step away from him. Step away from the victim. Now, red laser sights dotted the deputies' chests. Gas masks, tactical rifles. Authority that could not be bribed or bullied. For the first time all night, Carson's face cracked, not with anger, but fear. He slowly let the baton fall from his hand. Reed didn't lower his weapon. Not yet. On your knees, he commanded. Carson hesitated 1 second too long. Reed stepped forward and slammed him to the floor with a force that felt like justice itself. The deputies were disarmed, cuffed, stripped of badges. The sheriff sputtered incoherent protests. The clinic filled with the roar of justice arriving like a storm. Through the chaos, Reed crouched beside me, his expression softening. Mr. Nash, he said quietly. You held on. I'm here now. My throat tightened, not from the tear gas, not from the pain, but from something deeper. Relief. He helped me sit up. Behind him, a paramedic rushed to Lucas. He's alive, she called out. Weak, injured, but alive. A breath escaped my chest, shaky and uneven. Reed looked me in the eye. The same boy I once taught how to steady his aim while hunting, now a man carrying the authority of the entire federal system. You saved him tonight, he said. No, I whispered. I almost didn't. My voice trembled, but I didn't stop trying. Reed nodded once, firm, respectful. Then let's finish this. As they lifted Lucas onto a clean stretcher, the nurse's phone still recording displayed the number I hadn't dared hope for. 1.2 million viewers. Growing every second. The truth was out. And the truth was something even bullets couldn't silence.